Good morning. This is Doreen with ThoughtStorm Journal. I want to talk a little bit today about overcoming overwhelming odds in our lives. People do amazing things this way. You hear about it every day. And we commend those people because we all know how hard things can be. But then there are the rest who feel like they're victims of a world that's working against them, or that their circumstances or something that they just can't overcome. And for a very long time, I was one of those people. I felt stuck in so many ways in my life. I had a bad marriage that I thought I needed to stay in, a ridiculous number of failing career paths. It's almost embarrassing. Failed connections to the people around me, leaving me with very few real friends. Just roadblocks everywhere. It just seemed like every direction I went took me to another barrier. And strangely, I lied to myself about it. I told myself I was fine, and I told everyone else I was fine. Because that's what people often do. And I went inside myself, and I basically went numb, like people often do. And after years and years of this, I succumbed. I fell pretty hard into major depression. I was pretty much brought to my knees. I used to stare at my bottle of sleeping pills every night, wondering if I could, in fact, take enough of them that I wouldn't wake up again. If I was lucky enough to be able to cook something, I'd be slicing onions in the kitchen and staring at the chef's knife, wondering if one strategic self-inflicted plunge into my heart would be enough to kill me instantly. And that may sound melodramatic, but this was how my mind was working at the time. The nature of depression can cause you to think this way. Now, luckily, I wasn't planning my suicide in detail. I was just imagining the possibilities of it. And as I imagine each scenario, I'd overthink, since this is the nature of anxiety. And I'd imagine I couldn't get the job done. I imagined all kinds of botched suicide attempts that'd leave me in worse shape than I started, although still alive. And it wasn't an attractive scenario, so I ended up not going through with it, of course, and I'm here today to tell the story. But as fate would have it, I eventually worked my way through all that and reached the point where I was getting much better, and I got off the antidepressants and anxiety meds, and my doctor actually took these disorders off my diagnosis permanently. And I've been good ever since. That was 3 years ago. But how did I do it is the question. And it would be easy for everyone to say I was just one of the lucky ones, and I might have said that myself if something interesting hadn't occurred to me in the wake of all that. And this is important to know if you're overcoming anything major in your life that's keeping you from being what you want to be, doing what you want to do. I realized that maybe I hadn't given myself enough credit for what I myself accomplished. In those early days when I was contemplating suicide, I like to think now that there were universal forces at work. Later on, when I was looking back on it all and reviewing my dark road to where I am now, I realized that what saved me was a gift I'd been given very early in my life. And that was the gift of questioning. Although, since the day I was born, I've questioned everything. It annoyed people a lot. It still does sometimes. But it's what turned me into a writer and a photographer and an adventurer. I always had to know what was just over that ridge or down that road. I always needed to know why things work the way they do and why people believe the way they do. And I always had to know that next thing. I realized it was that burning curiosity, that questioning, that saved my life in those days. Ironically, my wondering and doubting whether or not my suicide attempts would actually work is ultimately what saved me from killing myself. That was an epiphany. That was the moment I realized that I had actually thought my way into being whole again. And what was the key? The key was that even in my worst times, because of my questioning nature, I didn't give in to my circumstances. I never once resigned myself to any particular reality because I questioned every idea of reality I ever had. That's just the way I was doing it. People, even my then doctor, told me that depression was incurable and I needed medication to control the symptoms. And I was told that my anxiety was just something that I might have to live with. But neither of those things turned out to be true, and I'm living proof, because I did not resign myself to what I'd heard about it. I believed all along that there had to be a way to overcome. The philosopher Henry David Thoreau once said, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation." What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. So here's the thing. It doesn't matter what you're trying to overcome. You can overcome it as long as you never resign yourself to a set of ideas about it that might very well be false. And this is a hard thing because we can get really stuck to our beliefs and ideas, especially if we trust those who gave them to us, like our parents or teachers. But just because we trust someone doesn't mean they're right about everything. When something happens and you feel stuck or trapped, try not to distract yourself. It's easy to want to go do something else and avoid thinking about it when you feel this way. But don't let it happen. You need your faculties in order to start questioning every aspect of that roadblock you're dealing with. Ask yourself what you believe right now about your circumstances, and then turn every belief you have about them on their heads. Imagine it's actually the opposite of what you believe it to be. Now, how would that change things for you? In order to overcome anything, you have to be willing to question everything you think you know about it. You have to start questioning anything your parents ever told you about it. You have to question everything your teachers or clergy tells you about it. And here's what else. You even have to question the so-called experts on the subject. Even the experts don't have all the answers. And that's why problems still exist in society. And you have to fully accept that everything you're being told on the subject could possibly be flawed or even downright wrong. You have to be able to entertain the idea that they may not have all the answers. You have to accept that you may have to search for the right answers yourself. You have to also entertain the idea that a belief that's widely accepted about it may not be the truth. And you have to turn off the radio, turn off the TV, the news, tell your friends to stay home, and shut out all the outside voices that try to tell you what to believe about it. And start thinking for yourself. And then you have to consider all the possibilities, do the research, and leave no stone unturned until you overcome. If you think what you already know and believe about your circumstances is the absolute truth, you're not alone. It's human nature, and you may never even look for another answer. It's human nature to accept what we know about it as gospel and to resign ourselves to a fate that may not be set in stone, when what we believe about it may be completely wrong. But here's the thing, we're humans, and what we don't realize is that we don't have to resign ourselves to human nature either. In essence, if something's not working for you, do the opposite. Oppose everything, rethink everything, reimagine everything. Challenge conventional ideas, reject societal norms, reject public opinions, reject group mentality, dig deeper, and find your own answers. If you do all this, think the unthinkable, imagine the unimaginable, I promise you will overcome this. Believe in your own power, because you have much more of that than you can imagine.